school sessions yesterday, which is short 15-minute topics and 15 minutes of questions. That the first one yesterday was on rent affordability, and Lisa's doing one on the 17th on working from home. So 2021, and as you can see, there are major changes to not very much, to be honest. Things are just kind of trotting along the same as we were. Our conference, you probably know by now, is not going to go ahead this year, but we will be doing other events throughout the year, which is a shame. But thanks again for coming. You didn't come here to listen to me gibbering on. You came here to find out what's happening, get some updates, and listen to Janice MacDonald from Deaf Scotland, who's going to give us a short presentation. So over to you, Janice.
Hello.
Deaf Scotland. Hi,
hello.
Janice.
Hello,
Hi.
is my microphone on okay?
Yeah, we
Right.
can hear you, but we can't see you.
You can't see me? Well, it's
No.
telling me that my screen's on, so on and off again. Is that any better?
No,
No.
we're just seeing your initials, Janice. No, wait a minute, it's changing. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, it's Monique.
I don't know that you want to see. The hair needs cut and my eyes are sore, I think, as a result of being on the screen all the time. So not looking my best, but I'm here anyway.
You look great. I
and
can see you, Janice.
Delighted to have the invitation and a short opportunity to speak with everyone today. I don't know if you're aware that we've been doing quite a lot of work around what we call communication for all. We've stopped really talking so much about deafness, although we do want to make people more deaf aware. But we really want to understand the barriers that are around. And COVID has helped with that quite a lot, because I defy people, even with good hearing, to hear well when people are wearing masks and they're behind screens and they're 2 meters away. And I think everybody's struggling. What it has done is highlighted how difficult it is for people with barriers, whether they're deaf or have other communication barriers. The masks muffle sound, they make it difficult to lip read or interpret expressions. The distancing, hearing aids are only designed to work at about 1 meter, so the 2 meters really makes it challenging. And of course, if that's all coupled with people being behind a screen as well, then it's layers of barrier. And we've been quite active because we know that people affected by deafness are 4 or 5 times more likely to have mental ill health at the best of times. So with COVID, we feel that's accelerated substantively. People are quite fearful. They're not going out because they can't communicate well, and the impact of social isolation really affects people's well-being as well. So I always just try to remind people that actually sensory deprivation is quite a strong form of torture. And when we've got sensory deprivation as a part of our daily living, then when it's compounded by other things, it really starts to eat away at people's confidence and well-being. So that's my primary contribution. I'd like to say a couple of things about our deaf young people. We know that deaf children leave school with an average reading age of between 7 and 9. And that's really not anything to do with their potential. It's much more to do with the fact that we don't put in the proper supports and the consistent teaching that we need to. We see from the figures that around attainment that actually the hard of hearing children don't do so well as those that have got a sign language background. And that's particularly worrying because it really defies the broad assumption that those who have a moderate or mild hearing loss manage quite well. The reality is that children or adults, even with mild hearing loss, don't manage that well. Mild to moderate hearing loss is as challenging to communication as a profound deafness. There's an age skew. There's about 1 million Scots affected by hearing loss, and there's very much an age skew. So it's not 20% across the board, but round about age 40, it's about 40% of the population. Round about age 60, it's about 60%. And at age 75, it's 90%. So we can see there are challenges ahead with an ageing population. And I feel we don't have the strategies in place just now to make communication as easy as it could be. And I think we definitely need to take steps to be thinking about that longer term. The reason I'm interested in LU housing associations is because you do like a lot of work with people that's communication based, whether it's in your customer services area, whether it's your housing officers, but certainly when you're doing your participatory groups and things like that, it's important that we think about integration. So the other thing that I wanted to say, and maybe before we threw things open to questions, is that we've also stopped talking about large D and small d deaf. Predominantly, we talk about a spectrum of deafness with 4 key pillars these days, and to try and help people understand the various barriers and solutions that are around. And so we talk about deaf, deafened, deafblind, and hard of hearing. Now, deaf is people who are born deaf. There's about 12,500 sign language users in Scotland. About 7,500 of them are deaf. They will have the other group within that 12.5 would be family members or carers who are living in the same home. It was a poor question, actually, in the census. The other group that would be deafened, people who acquire hearing loss beyond birth. And it depends what age that you acquire your loss, what sort of functional impact it'll have. If you lose your hearing at age 6 months, it has a much more substantive impact than at 6 or 16, because it's the early years, the first months of baby's life where communication and language are developing. We know that babies can sign and mime and communicate before they learn to speak. We know that children have most of their words formed by the time they're 6, by the time they start school. So that 0 to 5 time is really difficult if babies are born deaf. And it's the ability to acquire language that's interrupted. Now, people can learn to speak, they can become bilingual, even when born deaf, but it's quite a challenging route. And many babies these days would also be cochlear implanted. Now, the reality for me would be that mechanical devices are helpful, but we all know we don't rely on technology, because if it fails, then you still need a fallback position. If you're relying on a cochlear implant and you don't have sign language skills, then it's a big problem. But also, from our opinion, there's about 355,000 people profoundly deaf, severely deaf, or deafened, they would be described as. And they don't have sign language. They don't have skills to pick up because they've been oriented in English and spoken language. There's about 700,000 hard of hearing, and they don't have sign language and other skills to fall back on. They've been predominantly dominated by spoken language as well. So we take the view that if we all learned sign language and we understood communication beyond language better and differently, that it would make a difference even in Marks and Spencer's on a Saturday afternoon. There wouldn't be so many people shouting at each other. We would be able to communicate in different ways. So it's only a flavour of what a deaf awareness session would be, but hopefully it gives you some sort of idea of the work that we've been doing. COVID has demonstrated that the state can't communicate with all our deaf people. We're not getting the sort of information through in sign language, for example, that people would need. But we also get quite a lot of complicated information through that even I struggle with in many ways. So I think we've got to be thinking about easy reads. We've got to be thinking about how we use video and other methods of communication and not be so dominated by the spoken word all the time. And my final parting shot is, actually we can navigate our way around the world on symbols. You can drive, you can go through airports, you can go through railway stations and bus stations, and you're dominated by signage and symbols. And it would be easier to go through maybe other things in life in much the same way. So I think if we focused more on communication, and a wee bit less on language, that would be part of what we think is a better COVID recovery. So that's my 2-minute elevator pitch. I'm done.
Thank you, Janice. That was really interesting. I've certainly learned a lot. I think the last time you and I spoke, you mentioned about deaf-blind people and COVID, and their main method of communication was through touch, which is a real issue for people where we're not supposed to be touching each other. Do you know? And I think it's all those things, just these things that you've taught me loads. So I want to ask, are you okay to take questions, Janice?
Yes, I'm happy to take questions. I've put my email address in the chat. So if anybody wants to follow up after the session or whatever, they're welcome to do that. And obviously, you would give out my name and address. It's not a secret. Any questions? I don't see anything in the chat.
No, I think people put their hand up or move into chat. Any questions? Okay, can I ask a question, Janice?
Yes.
So all of us, I think a lot of us work within all of the age groups, but more predominantly with the age groups, the majority of people who have become deaf because of age, and we are kind of prone to talk, and I think we're putting up barriers to people because they don't want to get involved because they have this inability to hear. Can you give us any hints and tips about how we might be more putting up less barriers to, and I know you talked about symbols and things like that, but it's just things that it's all new, it's certainly new to me, and I'd really welcome some hints and tips around about that.
I think a lot of good communication we know about. It's having good lighting, having quiet background, no background music, and dishes clattering in the background. The usual what we get on Zoom quite often is the dogs barking, and things like that. So just taking the time to have good eye contact, to have good lighting, and to enunciate as well as you can. Try not to speak too quickly, and understand that a lot of people's strategies would be lip reading as well as trying to hear better. Right, the most common group would be 700,000 hard of hearing people, and it's the circumstances to hear better that make a difference. So their preference would often be one-to-one or smaller groups. And I imagine if you're doing participatory work, you're often doing things like that World Cafe style. That's a bit more of a problem because inevitably in a World Cafe style, there's a lot of background noise up here, and people are maybe trying to be 8 or 10 at a table. So I would say sometimes smaller might be better, higher impact, and understanding that if you are doing smaller group work, that you maybe need an area that is a separate room, or some of the things we used to do before we got into cost cutting. Now, I would say there's a lot of benefits from online work, because it means I can lip read much easier than I could manage a meeting in a big room, actually. And it means that we can adjust the hearing and the sound in a way that's harder to do. But to do your microphone checks, maybe try and have a microphone or a PA system available, and to also have maybe some of your key information in a written form, but not in a tablet of stone that's like 30,000 pages. Just very, very short and simple. I always think communication is about being clear, having considered what you want to say beforehand, and trying to maximize how you get that across. The other simple thing I think we just call rephrase. So if you are in the circumstances where someone's not hearing what you're saying, if you repeat it and they're still not hearing, then think about rephrasing rather than just continually repeating. Because, for example, I hear bass sounds better than I hear the higher level sounds. So I tend to hear men better than I can hear women. and everybody's a bit different on that. If I'm struggling to hear something, it's because it's all bass or because it's all treble high, and it's actually then thinking if you rephrase it, then you're maybe getting different intonations and different lip patterns, which can help us sort of click in.
So, thanks, Janice. Thank you. I think the other thing is, with Zoom, you can put people into separate rooms as well.
Yeah, it works, and
yeah.
you can have some people maybe in a smaller group and things like that. So we really want to find ways to do it that aren't too expensive and things. But you can obviously layer in things like the captioning, subtitles, electronic note taking.
Yeah.
There are lots of additional things that you can put in, particularly if you're dealing with people who clearly have communication barriers.
Brilliant. I think it's 2 hands up. Graham Wilson was first, and then Mandy. Graham.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, you were beginning to go into the area I was going to ask you a question about there. We're obviously having this meeting online. I suspect online meetings are going to be a thing going forward. How suitable is this type of technology for people with hearing impairment?
Well, in many ways it works for us in the way that the telephone and teleconferencing didn't, because we can see, we can lip read, we can sign over the video links, so that there's more opportunity for different forms of non-verbal communication. Sure. So that's quite good. What I would say is that some of the systems are clunkier than others. Mm-hmm. So WhatsApp isn't too bad for a small group. We find Zoom is much more accessible at the moment than Teams, and particularly if you're a guest. And Teams is really designed internally, I think, for quite good internal communications. If you're coming in as a guest into an event, it's still a bit clunky. Zoom has done a lot more work to help people maybe have several screens on their laptop or their PC at the one time, so you can pin screens for interpreters or for your notes from the note taker or whatever. If you've got a lip speaker who's maybe trying to help someone as well. So it allows for more combinations of support to be factored in.
Okay, thanks, Mandy.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to kind of say the same thing, and we do have somebody who's hard of hearing who attends online meetings, and she uses the captions, which is sometimes absolutely hilarious because half of the words are wrong.
Yeah. That would definitely be a challenge I would throw to people. So if you watch the telly or something with the captions on and you pick up all the errors, it gives you an insight into what it's like day and daily to not be hearing well.
Yeah,
it's the same
that's
thing.
Right. The other thing I was going to say is that Highland Council at the moment, we're very aware that reporting a repair is incredibly difficult for people who are hard of hearing, because the only way we have to report a repair is by calling our service centre. So if someone's hard of hearing, then it's very difficult for them to use the phone.
Yeah, I would agree. And we talk about accessibility, which, for example, would be able to, I live in an area where you're able to order your repairs online.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at that.
But being accessible, there's a bit about process that we also remind people of. So for example, come across places where you can order something online, but if you want to change the delivery address or the repair time or whatever, you have to phone to do that, and it kind of defeats the purpose of being accessible in the first place. And the other thing that we talk about is participation. So that there are obviously solutions to quick chats or short interactions that are acceptable. Even pen and paper sometimes works at a customer service level, but there's bits about like what you have to put in place if it's a longer involvement, or you've got more complicated chat. We have meetings where we've got deaf sign language users, deaf blind people all in the one room, and actually sometimes you've almost got double the amount of people at the meeting with the communication support, and often a couple of dogs as well, which is it's healthy and it's challenging, but and different combinations of barrier are a challenge sometimes to get round, you know.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I hope it works with Highland Council, Mandy. I hope they.
Well, yeah, we're actively looking at it.
Good, thanks. I think Lisa put up something on chat about your daughter, Lisa.
Yeah.
As you know, the kids are home schooling just now, and they're doing a lot of classes online. And I noticed the other day that my wee girl had some maths to do, some literature to do, and then some sign reading to do as well. And it was like a YouTube video that they watched, and she was doing sign language, and she came up the stair, and it was all different colours. So it was purple and gold and whatever. So she was coming and she was showing me what she'd learned.
Orange.
So it was really good. Yeah.
I just think if you think about it logically, we leave school with language qualifications, but we don't leave school with communication qualifications. Yet it's communication that's seen as important in the workplace.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. It sounds like that's South Lanarkshire Council. I don't know whether that's common to other local authority areas, but it certainly is a very good initiative. And Graham's just turned on live
There's
captions.
a number of areas. What we've been trying to do with the language policy, for example, is to get BSL accepted as a language qualification. Currently, it's not got the same university points as you would get for Spanish or French or other spoken languages. So there's a bit of work to be done to be getting things on parity.
Yeah, thanks for that. Tony, did you had a point? I saw you come in there on chat. Tony Kelly. You're muted, Tony.
They seem to have, by osmosis, started to talk about the different platforms that people are using and the ins and outs. And that's what the question was. So we seem to be moving or have moved in that direction anyway.
Security, certainly Zoom have taken a lot on board because they weren't as secure as they might have been. And what I would say is Zoom tends to be the people's choice of for accessibility reasons. Teams is certainly the public body's choice. And I would reflect on my insight would be that actually we're very dominated as a society by the public sector's choice of language at the moment, and the way that the way that the world works is the public sector dominated. So there is a tendency to have to write a 30,000 word report and fill it with pictures as well, and to make big tombs to look industrious or something. I'm not sure what it's all about, but I always say to people, if you have to spend £1 a word translating what you're saying into sign language, then you will become by nature more parsimonious and a bit more parsimonious with your words as well, a bit clearer. Deaf sign language users will always say we use far too many words, and it detracts from getting the point across sometimes.
I think the reason we're using Teams on this platform, Janice, as you probably picked up in the chat, there's local authorities in Scotland are not allowed to use Zoom. So it is and I don't know whether that'll ever change or not. I think Graham and another few people in the room have put on the interactive chat. Graham, how are you getting on with it?
To be honest, it's just like Janice said. It's not, I would say, good enough to really enable you to follow. And also it seems to do a strange thing that it'll put up a word and you'll read the word and you think that's not the right word, but then it will subsequently change that word. So it's kind of changing after you've read it. Clearly that doesn't make it easy to follow and understand. Better than nothing possibly, but not perfect at all.
Okay.
I would say one of the things for me is about the kind of social culture and attitude side. People don't want to think themselves deaf and dumb, and they don't want to think themselves deaf and old. and that those kind of historic connotations are still a bit of a problem, I think, as far as culture goes. So the reality is there could be 2 million people affected by deafness in Scotland. People don't declare it. It's between 4 and 7 years before people will go and get their ears tested sometimes. And I just say, you know, when you start to look at the subtitles and how well they don't function, then it kind of gives an idea of lots of people are living with those gaps all the time. And for me, subtitles are helpful, but when the words come up wrong, you start to have to process what might be the right word, and you lose track of the conversation. So I still go back to, we probably need to get into habits of saying less and meaning more.
Yeah, thanks, Janice. Has anyone got any other questions? Does anyone get any good examples or points that they want to make? Put your hand up. No, everybody okay? Well, oh, Evelyn.
Evelyn.
You there, Evelyn?
You're still on mute, Evelyn.
I've been.
You're on
Okay.
mute.
There you are, Evelyn. You're off now. I can't see you though.
I'm trying to take it off. So just a couple of things. First thing I was going to say is I understand exactly what you're saying about people with issues with their hearing with COVID. My daughter's in her 30s now, but when she was 2, she started to have hearing problems, and she has since she was 2. And at the beginning of it, I actually found it by covering my mouth with a magazine, because I wasn't sure if she was being a naughty 2-year-old or if she was, you know, unable to hear the instructions that she was getting. And very soon she was pulling the magazine down. So, you know, and from then on she's had hearing difficulties. But she's been fortunate that it's more one ear than the other. But she said when people started wearing masks, she hated it. It felt like a real barrier to her. And she does have some hearing, but she's had various options over the years. She's got 2 hearing aids anyway. But I think that's a big issue. I don't know if we're aware of it enough in housing, just how many people are affected. As we said already, we don't know how many people go undetected, because there's almost like a stigma in saying that you've got some sort of hearing difficulty. So people, you know, may know it themselves but may not share it with others. And I just wonder what we can do to try to be more prepared in terms of communicating with customers and being, you know, raising awareness within the sector generally, and thinking about what could we do, you know, to bring about training opportunities for colleagues to make sure that we have some either pointers about how we can identify people who are having difficulty, and not, you know, point them out specifically, but make sure that we steer the sessions that we run, that they're able to contribute to them and able to feel that they're part of them. And I don't know if that's about taking a sign language course, but I just wonder if there's something in between that, or what your advice would be, Janice.
Well, I suppose my advice is a bit mixed, because, you know, we would obviously like people to learn sign language because we think it's another string to our communication bow. And I actually think if you're working maybe even with immigrant families and things like that, it may be just as easy for other people to pick up sign language as English, because it is quite a complicated language to learn as a second language. So I think that for me, that whole spectrum of communication and language is quite important. And I think when I look back, I've done a lot of things in life that I would do differently now that I know more about the communication. So for example, I set up quite a lot of older people's groups and things in Renfrewshire, held up as a beacon of good practice, actually. And when I think about it, there was not a penny for communication support in any of that budget. So we've included the older people who can manage to speak with each other, they can hear each other. We've excluded a whole lot of older people who can't, and I guess these are the older people that are sat in their house quite isolated. And I think there are even couples who are sat in their house quite isolated because neither of them will go out because one of them can't hear very well. and one won't go out without the other, and all that sort of thing. The whole family dynamic starts to take on a different picture for me when you can understand that maybe that's why people are out in the potting shed, or they're not always in the room because they can't always keep up with the conversation. So I do think awareness is an issue, and I think that engagement, that participation. So if you've identified people who do have barriers, work with them to find out what solutions they might prefer.
I think some prospective customers to get involved with us are afraid to, because they don't think, they think they won't keep up. So I'm just, thinking about what can we do to reassure them that, we are prepared for their particular needs.
And I suppose we talk about shifting the mainstream communication. The default communication is somebody stands up in front of a group and shouts at them, and and the reality is that you probably need a PA system, that you do then need a hearing loop system to maybe help people with aids and things, and particularly if you're dealing with people over 40. And I think that if we changed the baseline for communication, it would have an ongoing effect. And a parallel in my head to the accessible toilets argument. Back in the day, we were making accessible toilets, and wheelchair users were telling us they didn't work because they couldn't turn their wheelchairs around in them and things like that. We were following rules of accessibility that weren't always very practical. And now we've moved away even from accessible toilets. We talk about changing rooms. The baseline has shifted. So I think we need to think about communication in that way, and be a bit less language dominated, because as we get even more multicultural, those language barriers will be another aspect of how communication will or won't work. And if you're community-based organizations, so if we're excluding people by default, then ultimately our communities are not as rich as they could be.
Thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So we've got two more questioners. Tracy, you were first to put your hand up, Tracy Hogg, and then Diana.
Thank you very much, Leslie. It's just maybe following on a wee bit from what Eveline said. I did actually go and do a sign language course, and it was for 12 weeks. And there was actually something had come through the North Ayrshire. We got an email to say if we would like to go and do it. It was only a lunchtime session. And I went along and I absolutely loved it. And I did say to the chap who organised it, if there's anything further comes up, will you let me know? Which he did. So I used to go through to East Ayrshire Council. This was 2019. So it was from October right through to December. I went through every Thursday and I met other people. There were some people there from North Ayrshire. I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. It was I think it was from 9 till 12:30. So it was like 3.5 hours. I found it really difficult, I have to admit. It was great. And probably even, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm trying to think of some of the things that I learned. I've got all the paperwork in my desk in the office. But the thing that I found most difficult was it's the facial expression and trying to sign at the same time. I found that really difficult.
Practice.
But we had absolutely some great laughs. We used to have to get around the table and say something. This girl told us this day she took her rabbit for the walk. She thought it was dog. And honestly, I would actually love to go and do another one because I enjoyed it so much. It was fantastic.
Well, I would share it. It's enjoyable, it's fun, children love it, but people generally, it's probably the language that people would choose to do. And one of the difficulties, I think, is it's not like you can't then suddenly go to BSL land on holiday and practice your skills with people like you can with your spoken language. So I think we've been maybe a bit remiss in not building in things like BSL cafes or informal sessions where people can just go and practice the language, because yourself, even if you learn another spoken language, if you're not practicing it, you'll forget most of what you know quite quickly.
Absolutely. And a year past at Christmas, I had to do, like, for our tenants, I done a wee 15-minute presentation at our Christmas away day. But honestly, if anybody, for me anyway, getting the chance to go and do it was absolutely fantastic. I loved every Thursday when I went. So it was great. So thank you, Leslie.
Good.
Thank you, Janice.
Cheers. We've got Diana Finney.
Hi Janice.
Hello.
Very interesting. I was actually on another course this week from Alana Harper.
Oh yeah. She's
yeah,
on my board.
Yeah, so it's just hearing some of the similarities between what you were saying and what Alana was saying as well, and the stigma around being deafness, hard of hearing, impaired hearing, and all that. I grew up with that. Like my cousin was born what's classed as deaf and dumb. It was just a horrible expression. He's never heard the spoken word. But we've been communicating for a long time using technology, so using like text messaging and things like that, which, as you know, if you communicate with someone who is deaf and has never heard a spoken word, they get the letters and words mixed up, because they don't know how like a sentence runs. But as you very rightly said, plain English, to the point, as little words as possible, and I think that goes across all aspects of our work. Intended participation. I support a group of learning disabilities, and we have to adapt our communication for that as well, in that short, sharp, pictorial, take your time. I can speak quite fast and very conscious of that. Take your time, face to face, no covering your mouth. I grew up with that with my cousin. He's an excellent lip reader, because he's had to learn that way. But I just wanted to ask you as well, do you think that this, during COVID, with using this type of technology, has been helpful at all, or do you think it's created more barriers for you?
For some people it's more helpful, and for some it's not so good. If they've not got access to broadband, or they can't afford the technology or whatever. What I would say is, in the people affected by deafness, historically, we've kind of missed the telephone age. So the move into digital was often through use of phone, into mobile phone, into smartphone. The phone didn't work for deaf people, so they tended not to. Maybe some would get engaged because of the text facilities, and certainly as time's gone on, our younger deaf people are much more. They're connected with people across the world because they can sign over the video links and the smart technology. So yes, I think it's technology is changing the way people communicate. You don't need to have a conversation to go and get your coffee out of Starbucks these days. You can order it online, and all you have to do is go in and pick it up, because you pay for it over your phone as well. So that whole understanding of the challenges for me, and I mean, we don't have all the answers. The challenges for me is, how do we retain our humanity and engage with people and do the things that make us human are around communication, I always think. But it's also the bits that are problematic, isn't it? How we use language and how we affect each other can be positive or negative. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've just come from another meeting there, actually, a forum about befriending and social isolation, which is the biggest, I suppose. It was always very high up on the agenda before lockdown and COVID, but in the pandemic it's become more so across all spectrums and ages and walks of life. Lost my train of thought there. I was going to say, oh yeah. Are you aware of Connecting Scotland project?
Yeah,
that's fine. I just wanted to check, because that's obviously another way for affordability for devices.
Yeah, what we've been lobbying quite hard for a whole strand of digital to be particularly targeted at people with communication barriers, and we actually work with a group that's spawned from Ofcom, looking at accessibility and affordability, etc. Because I do think the trade, those in the communications industry, could do more to make things more accessible, and just in the way the services, the water board and the electricity companies and things have to do.
No, that's very enjoyable. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. I think because I quite often do presentations, and folk will say to me, you want to give it out first? No, because people will just read it. They don't need me then. But just after what you were saying, I think I will start giving out my presentations beforehand, because I think if people you're saying like the people who don't admit to being deaf, then at least they can read and get the benefit of it.
Yeah,
So,
and certainly now with conferences and events and things, most of the stuff's online
yeah,
as you're entering in the door.
yeah,
So some of these things make it less noticeable, because otherwise, if I declare I've got a barrier, then I'm the only one that gets handed the note before the
Yeah.
meeting,
yeah,
and it singles me out.
yeah. So I don't know whether we've got any more points or any more questions that people want to make.
I've outstayed my welcome.
Oh
You
no,
said-
Janice, it's been
you said
absolutely
15
amazing.
minutes.
No, it's been great. I think really the number of questions and points that's coming out is testament to how interesting and what a lot of people have been learning from this session. So thank you. So does anyone have anything else for Janice? No, has anyone got anything else? Thank you so much, Janice. That was really good.
Carol
Nice
Hamilton,
to see you.
Carol
Thank
Hamilton
you.
wants to come in, Leslie.
Oh, Carol, sorry, I don't see your hand there. Come in, Carol.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted just one wee remark to Janice. I've just spent lunchtime with my mother, who's had hearing aids for years, very hard of hearing. And I was taking copious notes when you were speaking there, and I've learned so much, especially about the repeat and rephrase. So what I'm finding is when I'm trying to tell her or repeat again, I say it louder each time. I'm sure the neighbours can hear me, but I'm so
It's
pleased.
not the volume. It's
Yeah.
it's probably just that combination
Absolutely.
of
So I've learned a lot, not just from attendance of people coming into our building, which is a horrible building to try and hear anything in, but for my mother. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm always for the mothers. Well done.
Carol, knowing you and knowing your mum, good luck.
Yeah, you know her well. You know her as well as me, I think.
So the messages that are coming in are amazing, Janice, and people really appreciate if you have a look on chat.
Yeah.
It was so good.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
It
very
was
much.
great, and I'm sure we'll have you back in again, because I think that was really
thank you.
useful. Thank you. So while we've got you here for a little while, as I say, the next session is a tenant and officer session, and we would welcome suggestions for the agenda, or if anyone wants to volunteer for something they're doing or a topic of interest, then please do. So very quickly, just open up for general comments and suggestions. Any comments or suggestions? Should we maybe ask Carol back to the next one to see how she's getting on with her mum?
Listen, don't open that door, because you'll be hearing me every day.
The next one, Leslie, the next webinar is for the We Retreat for TP workers on the 7th of April.
All right, okay. So what we got there? Alan Christie's got his hand up as well. So what's the subject?
The We Retreat mindfulness.
Right. Okay. So sorry about that, folks. I don't know anything. Obviously, I don't listen. Alan Christie.
Yeah, I think, probably one that's common to us all. It'd be good to have some discussion around, we're having a particular problem with getting people to engage with us online, not because they don't have access to the equipment, they're not interested in that kind of online stuff. It'd be good to hear what other local authorities of House North South Regions are doing to kind of encourage. We're trying to change mindsets. We're getting there, but it's slowly, but just trying to encourage folks to think differently.
I think Mandy McClellan from Highland has had a very different experience, and very briefly, we can certainly bring that up. But Mandy, do you want to just very briefly come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. We have had a very positive experience in Highland. I don't know whether it's to do with our geography or, but we've found tenants who prior to COVID weren't interested in remote meetings, suddenly decided that, well, that's the best they were going to get, so they've come on board. When the first lockdown started, there was quite a lot of funding available through the Connecting Scotland. So we managed to source about, I think it was about 40 odd tablets for tenants to combat social isolation. And we went through a kind of training process with them. We did one-to-ones with them until they were confident enough to kind of take part. and we've now got, I think, about 70 tenants that are using Teams on a regular basis. We've also found with consultations, turning them digital, we're getting a much higher response rate. And we're also getting a lot of new tenants coming on board, tenants who previously really didn't want to kind of go out to meetings or go to events, but they're quite happy to engage from the comfort of their own homes. So it's, you know, going forward, it's something we're going to continue even once we get back to face-to-face meetings.
I mean, I think certainly when we start to develop this, and we are getting a small number of them beginning to trickle through now, but even in the surveys that we've carried out through lockdown, they're very clearly telling us that they don't want to engage digitally. In fact, some have even said, one group said that if we were going to force them to engage digitally, they would deregister. And so we're trying to find that balance of just trying to encourage. I think the other challenge is obviously is building confidence to people, getting over that barrier, and how do you train people when you're at a distance? You know, we've been looking at organisations like, you know, that offer support, particularly the organisations like that do for older people and stuff. But our experience has been quite different. I think generally our tenant population are very traditional in their views of communication, even they like a letter rather than an email and stuff like that. So. Did you lose anybody? I know you've gained some, and that's certainly what we're hoping. Did you lose some as well?
Yeah, we've definitely lost some. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's an age-biased thing either. I mean, one of our kind of rising stars is a 92-year-old sheltered housing tenant who has never owned as much as a smartphone. And we got him a tablet, and his niece, who is also his carer, set it up for him, you know, with our instructions. And he used to only ever attend the kind of local sheltered housing tenants meetings because he didn't like to travel too far. Now he comes to all sorts of meetings and he loves it. He's got a completely new lease of life. But yeah, we have got some people that, you know, they're still in the background, and once we get back to face, they'll come back, but they don't want to do it. I think overall, with the people who have converted and the new ones that we've picked up, we're still probably about the same level of engagement.
Yeah, I think we're certainly anticipating a hybrid when we go back to some kind of normality that we'll have online and up next year. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
thanks, Liz.
Thanks. I think Diana had her hand. I think Diana had her hand up.
Yeah, just then, Alan, on your point about getting people, you know, more confident. We've done this Connecting Scotland project now since probably for nearly a year, and a lot of staff went on, you know, the digital champion training, and we've become what's called digital champions. Well, so whenever we send out either a tablet, it's either an iPad or a Chromebook to people, we also include one of ourselves as like a mentor to help people get used to the device. What's obviously, it has to be remote because of COVID, but if we use other agencies such as Lead Scotland, or we've got Centre for Inclusive Living in Perth and Kinross, there's one in Glasgow as well, there are lots of places. They have got full PPE and go into community police and are allowed to go into people's houses to show them how to work devices, because they've obviously been vaccinated now, you've had the first vaccination. So this is sort of starting to move on now towards more people going into houses, as long as, you know, like they've had the vaccination, you've had the vaccination, and you've got PPE. But we've got some tenants, and I'm sure that Leslie and Tony will be familiar with, called Gerald Lowe and Lynn Palmer, who have both become which took months, but of confidence building. And I mean, I just came from a TPT meeting there, which started off in October, which is our forums, which are now on through Teams, which I don't like Teams, but anyway, we've got to use it, no choice. So we've got a Teams meeting, we've trained people up. So we had at that meeting the same amount of participation as what we would have at a normal face-to-face meeting. but we've had different new blood, if you like, and younger people as well who have got these devices. So it's not just like you get a device because you're older and don't communicate. We've got people who are homeschooling, we've got young parents, etc. as well now starting to come on board, which is great. But it's not digital, not be all end all. It's not digital by default. Obviously, we still do our phone calls, we still do our surveys, our paper copies, our newsletters and stuff. But it takes time. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
I
think that's the thing. I mean, we carried out a survey just recently. It was to do with health and social care and the use of common rooms and things like that. We have you to apply into Connecting Scotland for funding, and we sent out like 180 surveys, and only one person got back to us. You know, that's the kind of, and we were trying to say to them, look, you'll be able to use it to do online shopping, you'll be able to use it to connect with your family in Australia. We'll be able to, because we don't have a shortage of the digital champions, and we have been advertising organisations like AbilityNet and stuff to help people to get online. But it's overcoming that initial barrier about, it's like they're taking the horse to the water, but trying to make it drink is the difficult part.
Well, we identified people as staff. That's how we did it, because during the first lockdown, I was redeployed, like a lot of people, to doing welfare checks. So I spent 4 months making phone calls for people who are shielding, checking, make sure people got food parcels, heat, light, etc. Dealing with emergency stuff. So we got to build relationships with people in that way, and that's how we got to know who would benefit more from a device. And then at word of mouth, I'd get a phone call. Oh, so and so, said that you could get an iPad for this, and I know somebody. My parents would really benefit from this. They're elderly and can't get out, need help with online shopping. So that's the way that we've done it.
Okay, thanks everybody. I see Claire's just said that you've just had a load delivered from Connecting Scotland, Claire. Was that in the chat, Claire Talbot?
We haven't yet. We're about to. We're all excited. I think they're due, we hope, in the middle of next week. So Lindsay's actually on the call too. We've already been through the Digital Champion training, so we've already earmarked a few. We're working quite closely with the local schools and things. So the timing's perfect, given all the homeschooling and everything. So we're really excited about taking this project forward. It's going to be great. So this is all really useful. So thanks very much, folks. It's great.
Good. Thanks, Claire. So without any further ado, unless anyone's got any other points, you can always contact us, email us, have a look on our new website. Is there anybody got anything they want to say? Is there anything, any points? Did you enjoy it today? Yeah.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really interesting, wasn't it? I really enjoyed it as well. And I realised my own feelings when I hear Janice talking there and sort of falling into the trap of making the basic mistakes time and time again. So unless anyone's got any other points or anything they want to add, thank you. Anyone, anything? Last words?
Sorry, Leslie, were you shouting on me?
Sorry, no, that I remember. Maybe I was.
Sorry, the door went and I had to run to get the door. And I thought,
no, you're fine. No, you're fine. So thank you so much for everyone's huge thanks to Janice for that experience, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. I think there's a short one coming up. Lisa's going to be talking to us about hints and tips about working from home. And thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Safe home.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
From one meeting to the next.
I know there's Hugh on the phone here. I'm just going to take this call. Hi, Hugh. Uh-huh. Now. Was it Stuart? Right. That's all we needed. Right, that's all we needed to know. We just needed to know who did your training for HRA, and that's it, Hugh. Right, did he do the HRA part? Right, okay. That's all we needed to know. We just wanted to try and source a trainer So thank you very much for getting back to me. I'm in a call just now, but seeing as how you're so important and you're on my board, I thought I'd better crawl to you and take the call. Cheers, you. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
What are you like?
Consistent. I just think Anne's been looking for me as well. So I can't see you, Elaine. I can only see you.
I know I took myself off earlier on.
Right,
I
you
took
all right?
myself off at least a space for somebody else.
That was good.
I think you're
Well,
right
you're
about that.
still
I think you're right about that wee cardigan.
That's lovely, but you're still recording, Elaine?
Oh.
Yeah, it's very small, isn't it?